I heard the words. Not from a lawyer, not from a friend, but from my wife, leaning in, her voice low, brushing another man's wrist like I never existed. If I had met you before Jim, I never would have married him. 6 words. Small, almost soft. But they erased 15 years of my life in a single breath. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just stood there, beneath the golden lights of the Beverly Hilton, and felt something inside me go cold. Hollow. My name is Jim Callahan. I was the kind of husband who believed in duty, in staying. But in that moment I realized, loyalty doesn't keep someone who's already gone. And then, she saw me. She looked right at me. The smile vanished. Her eyes shifted. It wasn't guilt I saw. It was calculation. If you've ever stood in a moment like that, stay with me. This is my story. And maybe, it's yours too. The invitation had been sitting on our kitchen counter for over a week. Half buried under work papers, unopened, a fundraiser. Black tie. Hosted by Victoria's firm at the Beverly Hilton. She told me I didn't need to come. It's just work, Jim. You hate these things. She said it the way she always did. Polished, sweet on the surface, distant underneath. I almost believed her. But that night, something didn't sit right. Maybe it was the way she lingered at the mirror longer than usual, adjusting her diamond earring with a careful flick. Maybe it was the way she didn't look at me when she whispered, "Don't wait up." Or maybe it was just the silence. That kind of silence that creeps in after too many nights of being strangers in the same house. So I shaved. I put on the black suit, and I called for a car. What I didn't know was that by the end of the night, I'd be watching my entire life unravel in a room full of strangers. The car dropped me off just past 8. The Beverly Hilton was glowing. Marble steps lit like a stage. Valets moving like clockwork. Inside, it smelled like money and champagne. I didn't belong there. But I walked in anyway. Soft jazz drifted through the ballroom. Women in backless gowns laughed behind champagne flutes. Men in tuxedos talked numbers and names like weapons. And there, near the terrace doors, I saw her, Victoria. She was laughing, really laughing. Head tilted, eyes bright. Wearing that pale blue gown she once called a smart investment. It fit her like second skin. And standing beside her, one hand casually resting on the small of her back, was Nathaniel Pierce. Tall, crisp, the kind of man who doesn't smile wide, just enough to let you know he already won. I didn't need to hear anything yet. The way her hand lingered on his sleeve, the way her body leaned just a little too close, told me everything I hadn't wanted to believe. And then, I heard her voice. If I had met you before Jim, I never would have married him. Her voice was velvet, quiet, intimate, meant for his ears, not mine, and then I saw him lean in. Nathaniel didn't even blink, just smiled, that slow, smug kind of smile that says, "I've already taken what was yours." My chest didn't explode. It didn't even burn. It went still, cold, like someone had flipped a switch inside me and shut off the lights. 15 years, a marriage, a son, all of it erased by one whispered confession and one knowing look. And then, she looked up. Our eyes met. She froze, not in guilt, not in shame, but calculation. Like a chess player caught mid-move, measuring her next step. I didn't storm over, didn't cause a scene. I just stood there, watching the truth arrive, not with a bang, but with absolute quiet clarity. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I finally saw my wife, really saw her. And then, I turned around. I didn't remember leaving the ballroom, not the doors, not the elevator, not the lobby. Just silence. Outside, the night air cut sharp against my skin. A doorman asked if I needed a car. I shook my head and started walking. Los Angeles glittered around me. Restaurants buzzing, headlights sweeping across palm-lined streets, the city carrying on like nothing had happened. But something had. Something inside me had cracked. Not loud, not visible. Just split. By the time I got home, our penthouse was dark. Only the skyline lit the windows, blinking like a city too busy to care. I poured a glass of whiskey and sat at the kitchen island. The same island where we used to eat Sunday pancakes. Where Ethan once spilled juice and cried because he thought he ruined the marble. Now, only one thing sat between me and the glass. A manila folder, still sealed, divorce papers. My lawyer had sent them months ago, just in case. Back then, I didn't even open them. Now, I couldn't look away. I used to think things would get better. That rough patches were just patches. You push through. You stay. That's what marriage means, right? Victoria wasn't always like this. There were days I admired her. Hell, I fell for her because of that brilliance. The way she could walk into a room and own it without saying a word. She climbed fast. Law school, partner, corporate boards, deals with men twice her age, twice her arrogance. I stayed in my lane. Software, AI systems, late nights with code and coffee. We used to call it balance. Later it just became distance. There were signs, I know that now. Nights she came home late, Nights she came home drunk, and when I asked if she was okay, she'd wave me off like I was a child. You worry too much, Jim. I stopped asking, stopped pressing, stopped hoping. And somewhere in between missed dinners and quiet mornings, I started losing my wife, inch by inch. Thing is, I didn't know how far I'd already lost her, until that night. The next morning I heard Ethan's footsteps before I saw him, 12 years old, still half asleep, hair sticking up in every direction. "Morning, Dad," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. I forced a smile. "Morning, buddy." He slid into the kitchen stool, legs swinging, not knowing the ground beneath his family had just shifted. He asked about pancakes. I made them, the way I always did. Golden edges, too much syrup, the middle just slightly undercooked the way he liked. But my hands, they shook when I flipped the spatula. He didn't notice. Kids rarely do. They trust what they see. And what he saw was his dad, standing by the stove just like any other Saturday. What he didn't see was the divorce folder still sitting in my study, or the replay of Victoria's whisper echoing in my skull. He didn't know that the life we built for him was already fracturing, and I didn't know how to protect him from a truth that would shatter so much more than just a marriage. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I sat alone in the dark. No TV, no music, just the hum of the city outside the window and the ticking of a wall clock I'd never noticed until then. Victoria still hadn't come home. No text, no excuse, just silence, like I didn't exist. And maybe, in her mind, I didn't anymore. I walked into my office, opened the folder, ran my fingers along the first page, my name, her name, all those years of us reduced to paperwork. I didn't sign, not yet. I wasn't angry enough, not broken enough, but I was close, closer than I'd ever been. I opened my laptop, typed one name, Jason Landry, a forensic accountant, a quiet man my lawyer once said to call if things ever got ugly. I didn't hit send, just stared at the draft. I wasn't ready to go to war, but I was ready to stop pretending peace still lived here. She came home at 2:47 a.m. I heard the key turn, slow, cautious, heels in hand, hair tousled. The scent of champagne and perfume hit the hallway before she did. She didn't expect me to be awake. Victoria froze in the doorway when she saw me, still sitting at the kitchen island, one hand resting on the divorce folder. "Oh, come on, Jim," she said, rolling her eyes. "Don't be dramatic." She dropped her heels with a careless thud, then reached for a glass of water like this was any other night. I didn't say a word, didn't need to. Her eyes flicked to the folder, then to the second glass on the counter, untouched whiskey. "Seriously?" she scoffed, voice sharpening. "You're actually going through with this?" I looked at her, not past her, not through her, at her. "I saw you," I said quietly. That was the first time her face broke, not completely, but just enough to see the crack. And in that moment, I think she knew. This time, I wasn't bluffing. She didn't deny it, didn't stutter, just stood there, hair wild, dress creased, mascara smudged, and still tried to look in control. "You've been checked out for years," she muttered. "Don't act surprised now." Her voice wasn't hurt, it was bitter, tired, like this was somehow my fault. "You care more about your company than your marriage," she added. "More about your projects than me." I didn't flinch, didn't raise my voice. I just tapped my finger once, right on the folder between us. I want a divorce. That stopped her, just for a second. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're not serious." But I was, and she could see it. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing. I wasn't explaining. I wasn't asking her to stay. I stood up, walked past her like a man who finally understood. There's nothing left to fix when the person beside you was already gone long before the goodbye. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I slept. Morning came like it always did. Light spilling in through floor-to-ceiling windows, the hum of traffic rising with the sun. But nothing felt normal. I stood in the kitchen, coffee going cold, listening to the faint sounds upstairs. Closet doors sliding, the hiss of the shower, heels tapping across hardwood like a metronome. She was getting ready like nothing had happened. When Victoria finally came down, she didn't look at me. She just grabbed her phone, checked her reflection, and said, "Don't forget Ethan's dental appointment this week." Like she hadn't shattered our marriage 10 hours earlier. "Victoria," I said, voice low. She stopped, glanced up, briefly. I saw the calculation again. Cold, clean. "I want you to sign them." I didn't raise my voice, didn't beg, just said the words like a man done waiting. She smiled, tight, dismissive. "You've been threatening this for months, Jim. You'll calm down. You always do." She walked out. And that was the moment something in me locked into place. This time, I wasn't backing down. That afternoon, I made the call. Jason Landry, forensic accountant. Not the kind you find in a Google search, the kind your lawyer whispers about in a hallway when no one else is listening. We met at a coffee shop in Westwood, quiet corner table. No eye contact with strangers. No names used out loud. Jason was older, mid-50s maybe, soft-spoken, calm, like a man who's seen too much and reacts to nothing. "I'll be direct," he said, sliding a slim folder across the table. "It's worse than you think. Inside, bank statements, shell corporations, wire transfers I'd never authorized, all traced back to Victoria. She's been moving funds for over a year," Jason said. "Small at first, then bigger. Most of it funnels into this." He tapped a document, a deed, a penthouse in downtown San Francisco, owned by a holding company, tied to Nathaniel Pierce. I didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't breathe, because I knew what that meant. This wasn't just betrayal, this was a takeover. I stared at the deed, at Nathaniel's name printed in small, perfect font, like it wasn't soaked in blood. Jason didn't flinch. "This isn't just about the affair, Jim," he said. "They're pushing to remove you from your own company." My jaw tightened. "How?" "They've been working the board," he continued, slowly, carefully, framing you as tired, out of touch, burned out. "They're telling your investors you've checked out emotionally, and Victoria's offering a stability plan." It was brilliant, and surgical, and exactly the kind of move Victoria would execute without blinking. I'd built that company from my 20s. Code, patents, sleepless nights. She'd been there, at the beginning. But now she wasn't supporting it. She was dismantling it. And Nate? He wasn't just a shadow anymore. He was the architect behind the fall. I left the cafe into a sharp wind, didn't notice the cold, because something colder was growing inside me. I had lost my wife, but I wasn't about to lose my son, or my name, or the work I'd bled for. That night I couldn't sleep, not from anger, but from a question that had started quietly and now refused to leave. How long had she been gone? Not physically, emotionally. How far back did the lies stretch? I sat alone at the dining table. The apartment was still. Ethan had fallen asleep hours ago, his sneakers still by the door, his backpack open, half a math assignment spilling out. I opened a drawer, pulled out an old envelope, medical records, hospital bills, things from when Ethan was born. There'd been a brief separation back then, months where we lived apart. We reconciled. Then suddenly she was pregnant. I never questioned the timing. I wanted to believe in second chances. But now I couldn't stop the timeline from pulling itself apart in my head. I walked to Ethan's room, watched him sleep, chest rising slow, steady. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I quietly collected a few strands of his hair and sealed them inside a discreet DNA kit. I didn't tell anyone, not my lawyer, not Jason, not even Layla, the one person I'd come to trust. Some truths have to arrive alone, and this one, it wasn't just about biology. It was about Ethan, the boy who still called me dad with his whole heart, who ran to the door when I got home, who left sticky notes on my laptop that said, "Don't forget to smile today." So I waited. Days passed like glass, sharp, transparent, breakable. I still made his breakfast, still packed his lunch, still listened to him ramble about science class and the new kid who smelled like cheese. But inside, I was holding a question that could collapse everything. At night, I sat at my desk, the sealed test beside me, like a ticking clock. And when the envelope finally came in the mail, I opened it alone, breath held, hands steady. And what I read didn't destroy me. It didn't have to, because it was already the answer I feared. The results were clear. No ambiguity, no margin of error. Biologically, Ethan wasn't mine. Nathaniel Pierce was listed as the probable father. I sat there, paper trembling slightly between my fingers. Not from rage, not from heartbreak, but from a kind of grief I didn't know how to name. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the erasure. 15 years of bedtime stories, soccer games, scraped knees, birthday candles. Suddenly, I wasn't real anymore. But here's the thing. That paper didn't know how Ethan says dad when he's scared. It didn't know the sound of his laugh or the way he holds my hand when he's too proud to admit he's tired. No test could measure the years I'd shown up. Quietly, consistently, completely. So I folded the results, tucked them into the back of my desk drawer, and told myself, whatever came next, Victoria could take the company, the apartment, even my name. But she wasn't taking my son. It started small, Victoria dropping little phrases at the breakfast table. "Your dad works a lot, doesn't he? Sometimes grown-ups grow apart. It's not your fault." Then came the gifts, sneakers Ethan hadn't asked for, a new tablet for school, game tickets Nathaniel just happened to have lying around. And suddenly, Nathaniel was everywhere. At Ethan's basketball games, at the parent-teacher night, smiling like he belonged. He never said much, didn't need to. He knew what he was doing. One night I overheard him tell Ethan, "You're a natural leader, kid, just like me." I stood behind the hallway wall, hands clenched, heart pounding. But I didn't confront him, didn't pull Ethan away, didn't turn it into a custody tug of war. I stayed steady, because Ethan didn't need a war. He needed one parent who wasn't trying to win him, just protect him. And I told myself, this won't last. Truth always shows up, even when it takes its time. I just had to be ready when it did. It came in the middle of the night. A message. No name, no subject line, just a single sentence. I need to talk. I can't be part of this anymore. It was from Layla Thompson, a junior associate at Victoria's firm. Quiet, overlooked, always in the background. We met at a small cafe in Westwood. She sat across from me, hands trembling around a paper cup, eyes darting like she'd practiced fear, but was still terrible at hiding it. I've seen what they're doing, she said. Emails, hidden payments, internal memos. It's not just unethical, it's criminal. She slid a flash drive across the table. I backed everything up. If they find out I gave this to you, I'm done. I looked at her. Really looked. She was barely 28. Exhausted. But fierce in that way, only people who've been lied to become. Why are you helping me? I asked. She met my eyes. Because I used to believe in them. And now I don't. That night, the tide began to turn. The flash drive was everything. Emails between Victoria and Nathaniel, detailing their plan to remove me from the company. Asset transfers, hidden payouts, board manipulation, and worse, settlement records tied to Nathaniel, sexual harassment claims, buried, paid, forgotten. They weren't just stealing. They were covering their tracks with silence and money. I spent the next 2 nights reading every file, alone, whiskey untouched beside me, Ethan asleep down the hall. Every time I saw Victoria's name, her signature, her approval, it chipped away at what was left of the woman I used to know. This wasn't about a failed marriage anymore. It was about survival, about truth, about showing Ethan what strength looked like when everything you love is under siege. And I knew now, this wasn't going to be a private fight. Soon, it would go public. Boardroom, legal, maybe press. And when it did, I wouldn't raise my voice. I'd raise the truth, and let it speak for me. That weekend, I showed up to Ethan's basketball game, early, alone, no distractions. I sat in the back row of the bleachers, watching him warm up, laughing with his teammates, socks mismatched like always. Then I saw him, Nathaniel, late, as usual, expensive coat, confident stride. He slid into the row behind me like he belonged there. "Jim," he murmured, low and smooth. "We should talk." I didn't turn around, didn't flinch, just kept my eyes on my son. "We will," I said, calm, clear. "Soon." There was a beat of silence. Then I heard him shift, but he said nothing, because he knew. The game started. Ethan made the first basket. I clapped once, steady, proud. He looked up into the stands, and for half a second our eyes met. I smiled. He smiled back. And in that moment, I didn't feel like a man losing everything. I felt like a father who had already made his choice. And that choice was Ethan. Every time. That night, Layla came to my office. No makeup, black coat, hair pulled back. She looked like someone walking into court, not just a building. "They're planning a vote," she said. "Next week. The board. Nathaniel's promising international investors, expansion deals, a fresh vision." "And Victoria?" I asked. "She's been meeting with board members in private, framing you as unstable, detached, says you're not well enough to lead." I leaned back, hands steepled, the city glowing behind me. "They really think they've won. They don't just think it," she said. "They're betting on it." She reached into her bag, pulled out another folder. "These are final, memos, asset transfers, and a bonus." She paused, then slid a printed receipt across my desk. A wire transfer, from Victoria's personal account to a private investigator. "She's been tracking you," Layla said, "for months." My pulse didn't spike, not from fear, from something sharper, resolve. If they were building a case to erase me, they'd just handed me the match to burn it all down. I didn't sleep much that night, didn't pace, didn't panic. I planned. Every file Layla gave me, I read twice. Every transaction, every email thread, every timestamp. I wasn't just building a defense, I was building a reckoning. This wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration, about taking back the name they tried to soil, the company I built, the legacy they tried to rewrite while I was too busy holding a broken marriage together. The next morning I called my lawyer, then the head of internal compliance, then my own CTO, quiet, loyal, brilliant. By noon, I had allies. By evening, a strategy. And in between it all, I still picked Ethan up from practice, still asked about his science fair project, still listened when he told me he liked math now, but only when it's about space. He didn't know what I was building, didn't know what was coming, and that's exactly how I wanted it, because he'd already been caught in too many of our wars. The night before the board meeting, the apartment was still. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, arms wrapped around a half-built Lego spaceship. I watched him for a long time, his breathing steady, his face soft in sleep. I wondered what he'd remember of this season of his life. The tension in the walls, the late-night whispers, the truth we never said out loud. Then I went to my study. The DNA results, Victoria's wire transfer, Layla's drive, the printouts. I stacked everything in one place, neat, quiet, clean. I wasn't afraid of the boardroom. I wasn't even angry anymore. What I felt was clarity. I'd spent weeks surviving, bracing for the next betrayal. But now, I was the one moving pieces. This wasn't just about defending myself. It was about showing the people who try to erase me what it looks like when the quiet one fights back. And in the morning, they'd see exactly what I'd been preparing for. The boardroom felt like glass and steel and tension. Downtown LA, 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, the city humming far below, indifferent to what was about to happen. Victoria sat at the head of the table, cream suit, hair perfect, smile tighter than usual. Nathaniel lounged beside her, relaxed, confident, like he already had the vote in his back pocket. The board members looked uncomfortable. Papers shuffled, glances traded. No one wanted to be first. I stepped in without hurry, no tie, no apology, just presence. Layla followed, silent, laptop under her arm. Victoria stood first. Jim, thank you for joining. We were just discussing leadership transitions. Perfect timing, Nathaniel added, like he was playing host at a charity gala. I nodded once. Please, go on. They launched into the pitch. Graphs, growth projections, buzzwords wrapped in charm. A reinvention of the company, without me. I waited, hands still, face calm. And when they were done, I said one sentence. Before we vote, I'd like to show you something. Layla stepped forward without a word. She plugged in her laptop. The screen behind me came to life. No drama, no sound, just emails, subject lines, internal memos, time-stamped threads between Victoria and Nathaniel. Their plan to force me out, worded like strategy, written like betrayal. The room shifted, chairs creaked, papers stopped rustling. I didn't look at Victoria. Not yet. Next slide, asset transfers. Money moved quietly into offshore accounts, shell corporations that just happened to connect back to Nathaniel's portfolio. Then came the settlements. 3, all tied to Nathaniel, all paid out discreetly, all buried in executive operations. I finally turned to the table. I've spent 20 years building this company, I said quietly. Built it from scratch, worked through every high and low, and I've spent the last 2 months watching 2 people I trusted try to dismantle it for power. I let that sit, then added, you can vote if you want. But it won't be on my removal. It'll be on theirs. Silence. Not just quiet. Stunned. No one moved. No one spoke. Victoria's face didn't flinch. Not at first. She was trained for this, still trying to hold the mask. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smirk twitching at the edge of his mouth, but even that started to fade. One of the board members cleared his throat. Is this verified? Layla answered before I could. All documents were pulled from internal servers, accessed under legal authority. Nothing altered. Everything time-stamped. You're welcome to audit them yourselves. Another board member, Crawford, folded his hands. I think we've heard enough. Victoria finally spoke. Jim, this is a misunderstanding. We've all been under pressure. It's been a tense quarter. No, I cut in, voice low, steady. This isn't pressure. This is betrayal. Nathaniel sat forward now, trying to salvage control. Come on, Jim. You can't think you'll keep the board after this mess. The market wants fresh blood. I looked right at him. You're right. I nodded to Layla. Let's show them what that blood really looks like. Layla tapped the spacebar. The final file loaded. A video. Audio crackled. A grainy recording from a private meeting. Nathaniel's voice, unmistakable, smooth, relaxed, careless. We get Jim out, flip the board by Q2, and Victoria and I are running everything. A pause, then a chuckle. And Carter? He'll fold. He's always been too soft to finish. The silence in the room turned electric. Not a breath, not a word. Even the HVAC hum felt loud. Victoria went pale, turned toward Nathaniel, eyes sharp, furious. He looked back at her, but the smirk was gone. I finally spoke. You underestimated one thing, I said. I don't raise my voice, I don't play loud, but I never fold. Crawford stood. Motion to remove Victoria Monroe and Nathaniel Pierce from all executive roles, effective immediately. No one objected, not one. The vote was swift, unanimous. And just like that, the power they thought was permanent was gone. The boardroom emptied slowly. Papers gathered. Chairs pushed back. Polite nods. Avoided eye contact. Everyone wanted distance from the wreckage. I stayed behind, hands braced on the table, breathing slow, not triumphant, just steady. Layla shut her laptop, calm as ever. We got them, she said softly. I nodded, but inside, I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt like I'd survived. Victoria stood last, straightened her jacket, smoothing creases that weren't there. She looked at me. No fury this time, just exhaustion, loss in designer heels. You think you've won? She said, barely above a whisper. I met her eyes, clear and unflinching. No, Victoria, I know I have. She opened her mouth, maybe to defend, maybe to beg. But nothing came. Just silence. She turned and walked out, the click of her heels softer than I remembered. For a moment I almost felt something like pity, but only for a second. Because what she chose wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. And now, she was finally alone with it. The headlines broke before sunset. Power couple implodes. Pierce under investigation. AI titan reclaims control. Photos, quotes, speculation disguised as journalism. But the real story? It was already unraveling. Screenshots leaked. Nathaniel's messages to investors. Private dinners. Promised shares. And then, the bombshell. His relationship with Mark Ellison, a high-profile investor. The same one tied to at least 2 insider deals. It wasn't just a corporate scandal anymore. It was personal, messy, the kind that stains names forever. Nathaniel tried to spin it, a statement here, a half-hearted denial there. But the damage was done. Investors fled. Clients canceled contracts. His empire folded like damp paper. And Victoria? She wasn't collateral. She was co-architect. The media turned. She was no longer brilliant litigator or deal-maker. She was the woman who bet on the wrong man and lost everything. I watched it unfold from my living room. No champagne, no fist pump, just me and Ethan. And silence that finally didn't hurt. 2 days later, the next hit came, a manila envelope, thicker than the last. Victoria's lawyers were filing for full custody. Grounds, emotional instability, hostile behavior, unfit parental environment. I sat in my attorney's office, the words blurring across the page like someone else's life. "She's coming hard, Jim," Jennifer said. "She's aiming to take Ethan completely." I didn't yell, didn't break anything. I just exhaled, slow, deliberate. "She won't," I said. Not because I was sure, but because I had to be. That night, Ethan wandered into the kitchen, barefoot, holding a glass of water. "Dad?" His voice was small, like he was afraid to ask. "Are you and Mom going to split up?" I crouched down to his level, looked him right in the eyes. "We already did, buddy. We just didn't tell the lawyers yet." He nodded slowly, then climbed into my arms, quiet and tight, like he knew exactly what he didn't want to lose. And I held him like my life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. Court is colder than you think. Not the room, the tone, the process, the way they talk about your child like a checkbox. Parent A. Parent B. Stability, structure, primary attachment. Victoria's team came in swinging, polished, ruthless, painting me as cold, detached, married to my work, incapable of emotional presence. They had reports, quotes, selective memories from people who barely knew me. I stayed quiet, focused. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had something better. Truth. Our team countered, showed her absence, her travel records, her digital trail, proof of financial betrayal. I watched her sit at the table, expression blank, but hands clenched so tight her knuckles turned white. But none of it, not the files, not the arguments, cut through the noise like the next moment. The judge asked to speak with Ethan, in chambers, alone. I watched my son walk in, small shoulders straight, brave in ways I never taught him. And for the first time since this began, I felt hope. Not strategy. Hope. It felt like hours. I sat outside the chamber door, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor like it might offer answers. Every footstep down the hallway made my heart jolt. Every voice behind the door sounded like judgment. Then, the door opened. Ethan stepped out, eyes wide, face pale but standing tall. My lawyer met me at the door, her voice low, almost stunned. "He asked to stay with you." I didn't speak, just nodded once. Inside, the judge had listened. No pressure, no leading questions. Just a boy with too much on his shoulders telling the truth. Ethan said, "I know Jim's not my real dad, but he's my dad." That was it. No speech, no dramatics. Just a sentence that dismantled months of lies, hundreds of pages of accusations, and 2 lawyers' worth of legal posturing. I sat down in the hallway bench, hands over my face, trying not to fall apart, because in that moment my son saved me. But none of that mattered. Ethan was holding my hand, tight, like he wasn't letting go, no matter what. We reached the car, and before I could open the door, he turned to me. "You okay?" he asked. 12 years old, but carrying more than any kid should. I crouched down, met his eyes. "I am now," I whispered. He nodded, then threw his arms around me. Fast, fierce, the kind of hug you don't forget. I closed my eyes, pressed my face into his shoulder, and let myself feel it. All of it. The fear, the anger, the shame, the gratitude. We didn't speak on the ride home. We didn't need to. And that night, as he slept soundly in his room, I stood by his door and promised myself, no matter what came next, he'd never question who his father was again. The ruling came the next morning. Primary custody awarded to me. Victoria granted visitation, pending further review. My lawyer called it a win. The papers called it a stunning reversal. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt still, like the noise had finally stopped, and all that remained was breath. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded the steps. Flashes, microphones, headlines waiting to happen. I walked out quietly, one hand resting on Ethan's shoulder. Layla a step behind us, calm, steady as always. Across the street, Victoria stood with her attorney, arms crossed, face pale, eyes locked on us like she didn't recognize what we'd become without her. Beside her, Nathaniel was nowhere. He'd vanished, the way cowards do when the spotlight turns harsh. That night, Ethan and I sat on the balcony. The city buzzed beneath us, but the air between us was clear. "Are we okay now, Dad?" he asked. I looked at him, brushed his hair back gently. "We're okay, buddy," I said. And for the first time, I meant it. For the first time in months, I didn't wake up bracing for something. No subpoenas, no headlines, no late-night emails with attachments that made my stomach sink. Just coffee, silence, the sound of Ethan brushing his teeth down the hall. I walked into the kitchen, and for a moment, I just stood there. Not as a CEO, not as a man in defense, but as a father. I made pancakes, let the edges burn a little, poured syrup too early. Ethan didn't care. We laughed over the mess, argued over whether chocolate chips belong in the batter. He said yes, I said always. And for that morning, there were no depositions, no betrayal, no press, just him and me, and peace that didn't have to be perfect to feel real. Later, I sat by the window with my coffee, watching the sun touch the skyline. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like reclamation, of space, of silence, of us. And I finally let myself believe this life could be whole again. It's strange what comes back to you when the noise dies down. I found my old sketchbook in a drawer I hadn't opened in years. Forgotten pages, doodles Ethan made when he was 5, designs I used to draw before the company took everything. I used to sketch to think, to dream, before every line became a contract, a pitch deck, a deadline. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I sat at the kitchen island, the same one where I once stared at divorce papers, and opened that book. No agenda, no product to launch, just a pencil and space. I sketched the skyline, our building, the way Ethan always leaves his sneakers by the front door. I didn't realize how much of myself I'd buried until I saw it on the page. I wasn't just rebuilding a company or winning a custody case. I was remembering what made me, me. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like home. Layla stopped by on a Thursday. No agenda, no files, just 2 coffees and a small, tired smile. We sat on the balcony. The city below us buzzed with ambition, but up here, everything slowed down. "You look different," she said. I nodded. "I feel different." She hesitated, then pulled something from her coat pocket, a resignation letter. "I'm done with that world," she said softly. "They offered me a promotion, after everything. Can you believe that?" I could. I'd lived it. "What will you do?" I asked. She smiled just a little. "Something honest." We clinked our paper cups like champagne glasses. No grand promises, no confessions. Just 2 people who walked through fire and came out clean enough to breathe again. As she stood to leave, she looked at me, longer this time. "You know, I think Ethan's the luckiest part of this story." I didn't answer right away. Just watched her walk down the hall and whispered to myself, maybe I am too. Some nights I still wake up around 2 a.m. not from nightmares, just habit. My body spent too long expecting disaster. Now silence feels suspicious. But lately, I've been leaning into it. I get up, pour a glass of water, walk through the apartment, the quiet no longer heavy, just honest. I stand by Ethan's door, listen to his breathing, that soft rhythm that once held me together when everything else was falling apart. Then I go back to my room, open the balcony doors, let the city lights breathe in. And I think, not about the betrayal, not even about Victoria, but about the man I used to be before all this. How easily I gave pieces of myself away for peace that wasn't real. How long I stayed silent just to keep a structure standing that was already hollow inside. I don't regret protecting Ethan, but I do regret forgetting myself. And now, I'm finally remembering. Not with rage, with grace. And that may be the real beginning. I saw Victoria again last week, not in court, not through a lawyer, just out, a bookstore of all places. She was alone, flipping through a hardback she probably didn't plan to buy. She looked up, saw me, froze. I didn't look away, didn't pretend I hadn't noticed. I just nodded once, not cold, not warm, just real. She nodded back. No words, no performance. And somehow that silence felt more honest than anything we'd said in years. I walked past her. No anger, no ache, just breath. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like release. Later that night, Ethan and I played cards at the kitchen table. He laughed too loud, cheated without shame, and when I told him he was terrible at bluffing, he grinned and said, Maybe I get that from you. And for once, he was wrong, because I wasn't bluffing anymore. This life we had now, it was real. And I was finally all in. You know, I used to think the worst thing that could happen was losing the person you built your life around. Turns out, it's not. The worst thing is forgetting who you are trying to keep someone else whole. I lost my wife. I nearly lost my company. I came one signature away from losing my son. And still, what I feared most was losing the version of me that believed love was enough to make someone stay. But here's what no courtroom, no DNA test, no board vote can ever measure. I showed up, every day, even when I was lied to, even when I was left behind. And in the end, that's what Ethan saw. Not perfection, not blood, but presence. That's what makes a father. That's what makes a man whole again. So if you're listening to this, holding your own silence, wondering if what's left is enough, let me tell you, it is. You are. And sometimes starting over is the most honest thing you'll ever do. This was Jim Carter. Thanks for listening. Take care of your story.